My name's Adam House and I'm a fraud. Hello and thank you for joining us for episode 4 of this first series of Fraud, a podcast where I talk to people that I think are doing brilliant things in the development and cultural world and ask them if they've ever felt like a fraud, to try and learn off them and try and stop myself from feeling like a fraud quite as often as I do. And this week's guest, I'm delighted to say, is Amber Anderson. Now, Amber Anderson, I was lucky enough to work with her very briefly for a few months, but I didn't fully get the chance to understand what her approach was to development and leadership, funnily enough, until she had left the organization we were working for. And I started to really get to know her approach via her company, Grace and Grit Coaching, and especially the YouTube videos that she now makes, which give such insightful advice. And I highly recommend any leaders out there to watch it, or anybody in leadership development. It's just, there's so much thought-provoking stuff that she talks about and that she tries to live herself every day. And that's where our conversation goes here. I'll be back at the end to say more about it, but for now, it's just one question to ask. Amber Anderson, are you a fraud?
Adam House. Yes, I think I am.
Please say more.
It's such an interesting question, right? I hadn't thought about it a lot until we chatted briefly when you reached out and told me you were interested in doing this podcast. And obviously, I've been thinking about it since then. How can you not? And I realized that, yes, I am a fraud because I don't always practice what I preach. I've been in learning and leadership development for 25 years. I'm a leadership coach. So I do a lot of preaching, if you will, and I don't always practice what I preach. But what's worse, what occurred to me almost immediately after that realization was I actually don't preach what I practice.
Ooh,
So
interesting. How do you
yeah,
mean?
I was like, there are a lot of tools that I have in my kind of personal toolkit.
Yeah.
That I use that I hadn't brought into the corporate space before. I work with my private clients and use a lot of the mindset and energy management tools primarily. But in my corporate space, I stick pretty much to the skill set toolkit.
Yeah.
And it's not enough. It's not enough for leadership development these days. So since that realization, I have done a better job of preaching what I practice and bringing in those energetics and mindset tools into the corporate space. But it was really helpful for me to realize that. So I have to thank you for asking me the question.
We're here to help. I was thinking that I was going to steal everything off you. And if there's anything going back the other way, that's just a bonus. When you say that it's not enough for leadership now for the skill sets, I'd love to delve more into that. But if we can throw back, you say you've been, we'll have to check passports and date of birth and stuff for you to say that you've been working in this field for 25 years. But going back to kind of building up your skill set and your experience in leadership coaching, helping develop leaders, where was it that you kind of separated for that much time of, right, this is stuff that I use in the real world, this is stuff I use in the corporate world? And what was it that kind of led you down those two separate paths?
So I think historically I was very in deep with the skill set stuff. And when I say skill set, I mean tools, frameworks, processes, like really typical traditional leadership development and learning frameworks. So that was kind of like my bread and butter in my career, right? And then I was introduced to a concept called immunity to change. And it's Lisa Leahy and Robert Bob Keegan from Harvard. I was introduced to the book and had the pleasure of going through the certification to become an ITC, an immunity to change coach. And it was sponsored through the company where I was working at the time. And that was a 12-month experience. They're Harvard faculty, so it was a very heady academic experience. But that was my first dip into mindset coaching, if you will. Right. And the immunity to change approach is that we have, of course, a biological immune system, but we also have a psychological immune system that is meant to protect us from making changes because it thinks it's doing its job, but really it's not. It's kind of like when an organ donor, thank you. Gets a new organ and the body rejects it. That's the immune system making a mistake. Our psychological immune system does that to us when we try to make changes.
Okay. Yeah. So there's a resistance there.
Yes. So I recognized then that was my first certification. I have 4 different coaching certifications at this point, but I realized that was one of the big reasons that leaders weren't actually changing their behaviors, no matter how many skills they acquired. So I could do all the training in the world, teach all the frameworks, introduce all the tools. Then you go back to work and you just fall right back into your old habits. So layering the immunity to change coaching approach onto the skill set was kind of the first divide. Right. And that was very focused on mindset. And I've since now also gotten certified in how to coach the unconscious mind, which sounds a little wooey and weird. Yeah, but it's really about energetics and energy management tools, how to soothe the nervous system, things like that. So it's skill set, baseline, mindset to actually implement things, and energetics to actually expand your capacity for change, to widen your window of tolerance. And those 3 things, when they can come together, is a game changer.
Yeah, I can imagine. And it leads me on. So this is what always blows my mind. And it's where I feel like I've chosen guests to talk to for this podcast on people that I see doing stuff that I'm like, wow, I have far too much inherent I'm a fraudness to be able to take that next step to do that. And I want to talk about to people about how seemingly everybody feels some sort of that. Knowing what you know, how is it a case that it's just, yes, I know this stuff, but it doesn't mean that I don't feel it? Or how do you see the balance of I can still feel like a fraud yet knowing all of the things that my mind is doing to make me feel fraudulent in this moment?
Yeah, so I think 100% still feel like a fraud on almost a daily basis. I think in action, I'm less of one now because I am bringing in my practices and what I've been doing for myself and my private clients into the corporate space. And that's really where I felt the biggest disconnect. And I feel like a fraud every single day. The difference is I have a lot more compassion for myself around it. I have a lot more grace. Hence, my company's name is Grace and Grit Coaching. Yeah. Because you need both, right, to be successful. So, and it applies to ourselves first, where we're toughest critics, we're our own first best client, all of those things. And so I have a lot more grace for myself around feeling like a fraud because I know it's totally normal. Everyone does. And it literally just means I'm a human with a fully functioning brain. My brain is just trying to protect me and keep me safe. It's working well. So thank you for helping me feel like a fraud. You're doing a good job. And I have the tools to widen my window of tolerance so I don't let feeling like a fraud stop me in my tracks anymore. And more importantly, I don't feel bad about feeling like a fraud because that just doubles down on the pain, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, you start beating yourself up for something that, well, when you say it sounds like a natural thing to think and feel.
Oh, 100%. Yeah, I totally believe that.
And I find that because it's one of the things I have an issue with the phrase imposter syndrome. It's the syndrome bit because that makes it feel like it's not everybody. But I've found it's more like an imposter pandemic, if anything. I've only met a couple of people that seem to have zero doubt about anything they do, and I'm pretty sure they were both some sort of paths, psycho or some sort of paths. So yeah,
Exactly.
I
There's a
don't know,
diagnosis there,
socio.
maybe.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. But
Yeah.
everybody else seems to get it. But I am interested in. Can you remember? Can you remember any examples of times in your life where it has potentially stopped you, and if what lessons were learned and what helped going forward from that?
It has stopped me a lot of times in my life, honestly. And I think I'm getting better at recognizing when it's happening now, so
Mm,
it stops me less. I'm also getting better at looking back at those times where it has stopped me and feeling bad about it. Again, just having more grace for myself and less regret, because I truly believe, and I work with clients on this all the time, there's no upside to regret. And I find myself experiencing it often. So I try to like coach myself out of that. But yeah, there have been a lot of times, even around the reason I say yes that I'm a fraud, with when I realize that I'm not preaching what I practice.
yeah,
I've stopped myself from sharing those practices and bringing them into the corporate space, especially lots of times, because I don't know if I thought people would think it was weird. Like, for example, like breathing exercises or meditation practices or tapping, like things like tools and techniques like that to soothe our nervous system.
yeah,
I have kind of attempted, like I've mentioned, our leaders are really struggling with stress and overwhelm right now. I'm going to put together a program to help with that. And as soon as somebody gave even the slightest bit of, I don't think, you're qualified for that, or I don't think that's what we need here, like I shut it down.
right,
Um, and so felt like a fraud in the moment, felt like that was a silly idea in the moment. So I just let it go.
yeah,
Um, but that has like literally, those moments have changed the trajectory of my life sometimes. Like in the moment, if I'm like, okay, I won't bring it here, but then later recognize I need to bring it somewhere. People need to know this. People need this in the world
yeah,
today.
yeah,
I always say there's an empathy deficit in leadership right now.
absolutely,
And so we need to talk more about that. We need more empathetic leaders. We need more compassionate leaders. And it's not just reading a book or taking a class to learn how to be empathetic. It is the mindset and the energetics work that you have to layer onto that. And so if that's not accepted by one person or one place, I'm going to go someplace to someone who does accept that and value it, because I need to share that with other people that
yeah.
want to learn from it. Does that make sense?
It absolutely does. And I think it's firstly one of the things that has taken me years to fully come to terms with is my philosophy and approach to supporting people in the development sphere, mostly leaders, isn't going to be for everyone. And
Yeah.
although I try my best to base it on the data that we've got today, and I know you do too,
Yeah.
we suggest and support things that work and push back against things that we inherently know either don't work or have no sort of evidence backing up that they work.
Yeah.
Some companies aren't ready for that, and I
Yeah.
feel comfortable now to say, which means they're not ready or they wouldn't want to work with me, and that's absolutely fine. It's their choice. I don't think that I know everything, and
Mhm.
who knows, maybe they'll be proved right with their old school learning styles and left brain right brain stuff, and who knows.
Yeah. Yeah. It doesn't mean anything about you as a person, as a human, right? It just means they are not ready for you and your approach and your, special gifts that you were willing to bring. So,
Yeah,
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 that's
that's
okay.
a much healthier way to think about it, I think, and just a truer way as well. I think everybody's got their opinions, haven't they?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Um, when you were talking about, because that is the other thing that I find fascinating, is that it is proven beyond doubt just the power that breathing has.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, but it's still seen as because you've actually started me thinking one of the things that I do 4 or 5 times a week as I do ice pool plunges. I've got my ice pool out back, and I
No,
try.
no, thank you.
It's not for you, no. And there's more and more data in things that it does. The reason that I do it is I find it as a fantastic meditation tool. It means that I've got to concentrate on my breath for 3 minutes that I'm in there. It means that you've got to change your mindset to, this is going to be horrible, yet I'm still going to do it. And if I do it early in the morning, nothing else is as horrible after that. I mean, everything's rosy, isn't it?
Right.
But not for a second have I thought this could make up part of my philosophy to do with supporting leaders that are going through high stress situations.
Yeah.
I've never thought about suggesting it even, or talking about it. And you're absolutely right. That does make me fraudulent, because I'm talking about all these other ways to deal with stress, which work to some extent. But the one that's had the best effect for me, I'm still keeping to myself, because I feel like a bit of a kook, a bit of a loon.
Exactly. Yeah. I just had a class yesterday called Widen Your Window of Tolerance. And it's about building mind-body resilience. And there's this concept, right, that our window of tolerance is, let's just say, this big. It's our optimal zone. It's a nervous system state where we're calm, we're grounded, we're thinking clearly, we can articulate our thoughts properly in the moment, all of this. And when we're dysregulated, you either go into that hyper arousal or hypo arousal, so like fight or flight, or freeze fawn are kind of the other ends of the spectrum, right? But there are things we can do to widen our window of tolerance so that we're in that ideal optimal state from a nervous system perspective more often, more consistently, for longer periods. And I delivered this class for just a small group yesterday, just sort of test it. And there were 3 levels of support that I introduced. And level 1 is just the super quick and easy. And it's things like breathing exercises like 4x8 breath or box breathing. And we did a couple together. There's a technique I teach called bilateral stimulation that can be done. Like, I could be doing it right now under camera if I was agitated or nervous or whatever. If I was dysregulated, I could be doing this technique and you wouldn't know. So there's things like this I want to teach people that they can do in a kind of a live virtual setting. And then the mid-level was tapping, is my favorite kind of mid-level technique. But then the kind of the all-in level, I call the emotional health and vitality protocol. And that you need to create for yourself, whatever that protocol means to you. So you're like the ice baths and the cold therapy and stuff is part of your personal emotional health and vitality protocol. But it includes things like sleep, nutrition, movement, activity, whatever, meditation. Like, I'm trained in transcendental meditation. So I do 20 minutes every morning and 20 minutes every afternoon, but it could be 10 minutes using, the Daily Calm app or whatever that is. So once you put together a unique protocol that works for you and your lifestyle, that it builds your life in a way that you're constantly widening your window of tolerance, so that when you learn a new skill as a leader or as a, an employee in a learning and development class, you are naturally better equipped to actually implement and make the changes that you're committing to making without being dysregulated and having that throw your whole system out of whack. So that would be a good example of you bringing in, like, this is what I do for my own protocol. And it doesn't have to be that extreme. It can be something super simple like breathing. 3 times a day, like hitting the pause button and just taking a few deep breaths. It makes a big difference.
Yeah, it really does. And I'm just thinking back to before doing any sort of reading in any of this. I remember I used to play a song if I wanted to boost my confidence levels. And I guess it's things like that you realize when you start to look back. I've kind of looked for these things. Like, it used to be playing PlayStation after a tough day for half an hour without speaking to anybody. It was something like that you kind of build your own ones without even really pinpointing why it is you feel the need to do that. When you started out, because again, I go back to the fact that I'm sat here listening to you being blown away by the stuff that you're talking about. And if anything, makes me feel like more of a fraud talking to you. So if we go back however long it is, where is it that you really started to, I guess, find your feet and realize that you could push through, or that you were going to try things even if you did feel fraudulent? Is it a modern thing? Is it something that's happened in steps? What's the journey been like for you?
I think it has happened in steps, but there was sort of a catalyst. And it goes back to when I was certified as an immunity to change coach. And I started to look at the research, and really get more interested in coaching in general, but specifically mindset coaching at that point. That was a time in my career. I was a global director of leadership effectiveness for a $3 billion company. And I literally had a team spread throughout the world. And so you talk about like around the clock kind of being on, like there was never a point where my inbox didn't have stuff coming into it. And I was just experiencing a lot of personal stress, overwhelm. I was constantly dysregulated, and I didn't have any of the tools or the knowledge then. Again, ITC, immunity to change, was kind of my first experience into that space. But I had a coach as part of that certification process for a year. And having that first experience with my own coach changed my life, because I decided once I started applying these tools to myself, one, physically, emotionally, like all of it. So I lost 50 pounds. I was very like physically unhealthy. I was on, daily medication for anxiety. I went off of that once I discovered coaching and started applying these tools and techniques to myself. So the personal impact on me, and it took time, let's call it like a year, 18 months even, was significant. And that helped me build confidence to start talking about it more, to decide I wanted to build a business, because I didn't have the confidence necessarily to bring it into the work world as much back then. But I knew that I wanted to share these tools and these techniques with people. So that's when I started Grace and Grit Coaching, so that I could help people that wanted my help. But yeah, since then, I'm at a company now that is I'm the head of leadership effectiveness and coaching at a global clinical research organization. And literally my entire job is leadership development and coaching the leaders there. And I use all of this stuff there. Now, once I realized I wasn't preaching what I practice, I started preaching what I practice and bringing that in. But this whole journey has probably been like 5 or 6 years. And I've just been adding a little bit more and a little bit more and a little bit more as I've had more experience and more education in the space. And that has helped with my confidence. So
I think it's fascinating to hear, and it's one of the trends that I'm hearing with more and more people I talk to is it's not being an island with all of this stuff, because as you say, I mean, I have not been in charge of a leadership team that is that global, that things are pinging off all day, every day, and there's a huge turnover to think about. And I can only imagine how easily that would throw you off balance, especially as historically we don't get taught the tools until we're already thrown off balance in one way or multiple ways.
Yeah.
The thing that's really interesting, so I've heard about like the villages of people or mentors that have really helped, in your case coaches that have really helped, but it does seem that having a trusted someone or network of people around can really help with that. And I'm wondering, is that something that's continued? Is it something that finished and you took the learnings from? Is it something that you do in different ways now, the coaching support?
The support for myself?
Yes. Yeah.
So yes, I have gone on to get 3 additional coaching certifications. Is it 3 or so? I either have 4 or 5 total now. I should have figured this out. I think it's 4. Yeah. And which each of those experience kind of came a community, right? That what I was going through the process with. So I have a a large kind of coaching community, but also learning is my number one strength on Strengths Finder. It's what I do for fun. I'm like nerdy that way. So I buy a lot of programs. All of the programs that I kind of purchase to level up my own skills, I make sure I'm buying programs that come with a community, to your point. So I want the content from a skill set perspective. I want the coaching from, a mindset perspective. But I also want the community, because I have my own practices for, managing my energy and nervous system regulation and all of that. But having a community really makes a big difference. So I have a lot of people that we bounce ideas off of each other, and we introduce each other to new things that are working well, share our challenges and our struggles with each other. It just makes a world of difference to have those communities. So that's what I want to build for the people that I serve as well.
Yeah.
Because I think it's really, really important. And I do think, and I'm curious to know with the other people that you've been talking to and just the work that you do, I think just the world where we are now post-pandemic, it's just more top of mind for people. So the self-care, the well-being at work, all of that, it looks vastly different, at least I think so, than it did 5 years ago, which is helpful too. So while I started my personal journey before the pandemic, I think the world is much more accepting to me bringing these tools and resources, especially into the corporate space, but also through my business. A lot more people are open and aware that they want support in this space. I think that's changed a lot.
Yeah, I would agree. I certainly, I think a big learning from me, and there were so many from the pandemic, but I think that one of them was just how much I had taken the communities I was part of for granted to some extent. And not even thinking about that. I mean, just in my personal life, being able to go and play cricket with friends, like when restrictions got lifted and we were able to do that again, it was just a deeper kind of emotional connection between everyone there. And we were actually saying it, we've really missed this. And that wasn't something that anybody even thought of before then. And I think you're absolutely right that it has made for this community piece. It's certainly been more widely accepted that it's a hugely important part of life, full stop.
Yes.
And one that I'm still trying to find ways to connect people into in a professional sense, because it is like most things, the professionalness seems to lag behind whatever it is we're doing outside of work to help ourselves, I guess. With so the world that we work in, and I think I said in the original chat that we had, another reason that I wanted to do this is I struggle. So my thing is, and the reason I've pushed myself to start talking to people and do this podcast is I've been looking the last few years for ways that I might be able to help support people. And the fraudulent side of me is in two camps. There's one camp which is I meet and talk to and read and see and listen to these amazing people, these incredible, well thought through, well researched ideas of how to support people. And if I go anywhere near the same thought or ideas, I feel fraudulent because I'm just stealing off somebody that's doing something already and passing off as my own. And we see a lot of that on LinkedIn, especially. Or the other side of it is there are so many people, and this is very strongly represented on LinkedIn. There are so many people out there that if they just happen to be charismatic enough, can say almost anything without any sort of data, scientific support in any way, and people will buy into it. And that feels devastatingly fraudulent, but I think I've got a lot of skills of those charlatans, and I'm desperate not to fall into that area as well. And anytime I see somebody that I feel is being fraudulent, getting another first class flight somewhere, yes, there's a part of me that's like, maybe I do just sell out massively and do this, but I can't myself. With you having such a strong philosophy on leadership and further and wider and how to support it, what was it that gave you the push to kind of open up more about it? Was it something that you just couldn't keep inside anymore, or is it something that you purposely thought, I know I've got something to say, here's how I'm going to try and work out what that is?
Kind of more the former, I think. So just the impact on my personal life that coaching had, and that the tools that I learned in my programs and my certifications had, I just felt called to share what I was learning with other people. And do I still feel like a fraud sometimes? Do I see other people on LinkedIn, for example, that are sharing similar content, similar, like putting similar value out into the world? Yep. And so shifting my mindset to, one, there's no original idea, first of all. So we're all frauds. Like none of us are making up anything so uniquely different that we're like the inventor of the concept, right? So, but my approach to it and my personal spin on it is unique and different. And once I kind of let go of, and I have not let go, it's still a daily struggle. But once I started to release the worry about what other people would think, including like, are they going to think I'm a fraud because I'm saying this because it's so not an original idea? That's what enables me to just literally share what I'm excited about. If I learn something, I'm excited about it, I'm going to say something, and hopefully somebody, one other person in the world, will find it helpful or valuable, or it will even cause them to pause and think, about what it means to them. And I talk a lot about this concept of like soul-centered leadership versus ego-centered leadership. And ego is not like necessarily a bad thing. It's just like that fear protection thing, right?
Yeah.
But most of us lead from like ego-centered protection. And if we could just lead from like intuition, soul, like what is meaningful to us, and really of adding value and serving people, and not even knowing who we're helping by putting these ideas and these thoughts and these lessons out into the world. It's just more fun, first of all, to do it that way.
Yeah.
So yeah, but I'm not gonna lie. I mean, it's still daily. Like I'll put like videos, cringe. I hate being on video. It's awful. And so I'm trying to do it more. I'm trying to get over it. And I freaking hate it. Like I hate my voice. I hate seeing myself on video. I feel like an idiot all the time. And then I'm like, then I get a message. Like I got a message on Instagram recently. Actually, I got a message on LinkedIn yesterday from a C-level executive. I've been talking a lot about highly sensitive leaders lately. That is another thing that I realized, that I don't preach what I practice. Like I identified as a highly sensitive leader years ago when I started doing research. I learned about Dr. Elaine Aron and what this means. And it's a real thing. And it's just like 20% of the population was born with a more sensitive nervous system. And I'm one of those 20%. And society does not appreciate our style of leadership. Society appreciates the louder, faster, you know what I mean?
Absolutely.
So anyway, this message, I got two messages, one on Instagram, one on LinkedIn, both about the same post that I'd made about being a highly sensitive leader. And literally hearing from these women that were like, this is me. I like, you're in my brain. I feel so seen. I feel so heard. Tell me more. What is this highly sensitive leader? Like, I know I am one, but what does that mean? How can I, embrace it? Cause that was about the post, like stop resisting it and start embracing it. And they're like, how? Like, tell me more. And so I know like that cringy video post, like it meant something to at least two other humans. So I'll cringe. I'll be okay.
Yeah. No, I understand that. Well, firstly, being a subscriber to your YouTube channel, the cringeness does not come across on the screen. So you're doing a very good job of potentially faking it.
I'm such a fraud. Thank you.
But I think that's the thing that really that I'm just so enamored by, is the fact that you find a way, you find a way to push yourself to do it. And I think I'm learning a lot from that. I genuinely think that's and you've hit on something with just not caring. Our inner voices are so destructive so much of the time, aren't they? And they are always that worst troll person that you fear when you put anything out. When the truth is, there's plenty of stuff out there that nobody loves it. There is no universal love of something. There is no universal hate of something. Everybody's going to like or dislike stuff.
Yeah.
And being reminded of that is really, really healthy, I guess.
Well, and I think the question that you need to ask yourself, so if your story is I'm a fraud, so I can't go out with what I want to go out with publicly because it's been done, it's been said, I'm copying somebody else. Whatever that story is, like, who would you be without that story? That's the work that you want to do and start to imagine is who would you be as a person? What kind of value would you be putting out in the world if you let go of that story that you're a fraud? Because it is totally just an optional story that you are choosing, like the negative, the self-limiting beliefs, all of that. They're loud. Those voices are loud and they are hard to break down and get rid of. But the more you remind yourself, like, it's not objectively true. Like, these are completely optional thoughts. I can choose to believe whatever I want to believe. Like, just who would you be without that story? And it's kind of a magical place when you get to the other side of it. Not to say that you're ever fully on the other side, but the journey going through it, if you can learn to love the journey, that's the game changer.
That's amazing advice. I'm taking that away from today. ASAP. Just before we finish, I'm genuinely interested. So if you were to talk to the Amber that was just starting out, do you think she would be ready for the advice that you've been giving throughout all of this? Do you think that somebody that's just starting out potentially needs different advice because of less experience or less life lived? I don't know. Or do you think, do you know what, these are practices and messages that from day one would help somebody get to where they need to be, where they're genuinely just sharing what they're passionate about without any of the fears that others have done it before?
I think they're definitely messages from day one, but not just like day one of I'm a people leader now, not just day one of I'm working in a corporate, like, big person job now out of college or university, but like day one, elementary school. Like some of these tools, because we teach the skill set, right? Even in grade school. And maybe it's different now. I don't have kids, so I don't know. I hope it's different now. But it's like, I never learned that my thoughts create my feelings. Like, what is this concept? Like, actually, we were taught that our other people hurt our feelings, like you on the playground, right? Oh, did Johnny hurt your feelings? No, like, my thoughts create my feelings. I'm in control of my thoughts. Therefore, I'm in control of how I'm feeling. Now, I'm not talking about like biological, like just everyday common like feelings, not a diagnosis, right? So your thoughts create your feelings. Very, very empowering way to live, right? Like recognizing how much control you and how much agency you have. But then also just the capacity we have to soothe our own nervous system, in that concept of the window of tolerance and the daily work that can be 60 seconds a day to widen your window of tolerance, and what a life-changing concept that is. That should be taught to kids. And again, maybe it is. I don't know. It wasn't to me when I was a kid, and I'm almost 50. So I was a kid a very long time ago. But yeah, so that was a super long answer, but yeah, day one of like childhood, this stuff should be coming into play.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. The window, especially, I think what a great story. Well, actually, thinking back, just realizing the power of the own stories you tell yourself in your head.
Yes.
One I talk about a lot in sessions that I do, because it's almost universal, is I've never ever been in a session where at least 3 or 4 people in that session say, I am dreadful at math. Like it seems to be a universal one. Yeah. It's like this where we all get along. We're all able to add up stuff, but there's something about if you didn't have the right, it's not you're dreadful at math. It's that something happened where you got to a stage where you hit a glass ceiling and you were no longer interested in math.
Exactly.
Or dreadful teacher, and you've built up the thing that you've got something so different about your mind that it can't process similar information to lots of other people. I think that's an incredibly powerful message. And as neither of us have any idea if it's going on, let's hope it is. And if it isn't, then I think we've come up with our next
stuff in the school
venture.
System.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah. Let's go global with this.
I love it.
Amber, thank you so much for your time. It's been a fascinating conversation. I've really enjoyed it, and I hope you have too.
I really have. Thank you for inviting me. It was so good to see you. So thank you so much. It's been great.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you once again to Amber for taking the time to have what I think is the most vulnerable conversation in this first series. I was blown away with the approach and thoughts that Amber put into the topic of feeling like a fraud, especially blown away that she was brave enough to preach about what she practiced, as she says in the conversation you've just listened to, that we do sometimes hold back on the things that we use to turn up as our best selves because they seem either irrelevant or out of the norm or not slick enough to be corporate. And it really has got me thinking, because although I feel like a fraud, I certainly have things that I do in my life to help with my general mental state of being that I don't talk about and preach. I mean, some people have heard me preach about jumping in a cold tub of water for a couple of minutes a day, and probably too much. But other things, just the way that I meditate and get my thoughts in order, aren't things that I necessarily bring into the corporate realm. And why? Because they help me be my best. Why aren't we discussing them further? So yeah, hopefully this it certainly gives me a bit more impetus to talk about the things that work for me and share those examples wider. So yeah, I really appreciate the conversation. I think it's a fantastic one, and I'm sure lots of people get lots from it. Now to you. I hope you've enjoyed this. If you have, and you think that anybody out there in your network will, please share this far and wide. The whole reason I'm making this is because if I feel it, I'm sure a lot of other people do. And I genuinely think that there are messages and ideas from the people that I'm interviewing that will help us all deal with these fraudulent feelings when they come around. So please share far and wide, subscribe on YouTube. We now know that we're mostly going to be on YouTube because it's the easiest way to share video, but you can also subscribe on Spotify if you prefer the non-visual version of these podcasts. Final thing, feedback. This should be the worst I ever am at this. So please, if there is any feedback on how I can be better, a better interviewer, and get even more out of the brilliant guests that I have on here, then please let me know. And case in point, I've got a little microphone this week. And that's from direct feedback from somebody that listened when I wasn't using a microphone and just suggested that they knew people that use these kind of microphones and that they're pretty good. This is my first go with them. I'm enjoying holding them. I tried them clipped on, but because I'm a face toucher, you'll notice that in a lot of my videos, and have a massive hairy beard, a lot of it was very, very muffled. So I'm now trying this to see if this works better. Let me know. Let me know about anything and everything that you think will improve this, because, I nearly said the feedback is a gift thing, but stopped myself because it made me cringe. Okay, until next time, thank you very much for joining us on the Fraud Podcast.